And we're in now for our very first panel of the Family Business Summit. And I think it's important for us just to establish the context. We know that in this time of major upheaval, in this time of a global pandemic, the survival of African family businesses is largely going to be dependent on their ability to respond quickly and their ability to be adaptive to the environment that they find themselves in. In this panel discussion, we're going to be tapping into the insights and the experiences of our panelists to really understand how can African family businesses reinvent themselves and how do they make sure that their operations continue to be viable in this current environment and into the future. So joining me now, I'd like to introduce my panelists, starting off with Patrick Bitature, who is the chairman of the board of the Simba Group. Mr. Bitature, what an absolute honor to have you with us today. I'm also just going to give you a little bit of context around Mr. Bitature before I introduce everyone else. Mr. Bitature and his wife started Simba Telecom in 1998, and the company very quickly became a franchisee of MTN Uganda, which had actually just opened up in the country at the time. And since then, they have really become the largest reseller of MTN products in Uganda. And over the years, the company has diversified into different sectors to form the Simba Group of companies, which today has subsidiaries in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Mr. Bitature, thank you very much for making the time to be with us. On your screen, ladies and gentlemen, you're also seeing Mr. Patrick Odier, who of course is Senior Managing Partner of Lombard Odier, but also chairman of the board at Bank Lombard Odier. And he comes into this conversation having joined the bank since 2014 and has been a senior managing partner of the Lombard Odier Group since 2008. And what a privilege for us to have him here in this conversation with us, especially given the history of a company that was established in 1796. So if you're doing your maths as quickly as I am, you would quickly realize that we're talking about a family history and a family business that is rooted in excess of 200 years. So I know that there's going to be some deep insights that he's going to be sharing with us. And of course, we've got Amir Ben Yahmed back with us for this panel discussion. So welcome back to you, Amir. And allow me just to say a few things about you, Amir, if you will. So we know that you graduated from INSEAD in 1993, after which you were working in investment banking and brokerage firm Gruntal & Co., which is based, of course, in New York, and quickly then joined Jeune Afrique Media Group, where you had been managing the company and developing its program. In 2012, you founded the Africa CEO Forum, which today has quickly become the largest gathering of the African private sector. So again, thank you for availing yourself for this panel discussion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you joining us from all over the world, I do have a promise that I want to make to you, and that is I'd like to bring in your voice into this conversation. So please do send me your questions and your comments. And once we've gone through the moderated part of this conversation, I'm going to pose some of your questions to Mr. Bitature, to Mr. Odier, and of course to Mr. Yahmed as well. So let me start off here. Let me start off with you, Patrick. You know, there are very few companies, family businesses in particular around the world that can talk about a history that goes beyond 200 years. And one thing we know for sure, that with a 200-year history, your family business has experienced many crises before, and testament to the fact that you're here, has survived every single one of them. Question to you is, how do family businesses survive crises, and how has the Lombard Odier Group survived over the decades and in centuries as well?
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for having me in this debate. It's a pleasure to participate. We certainly have a history of 224 years, which means that we have probably learned some lessons of these crises that we went through. And I think the first thing I'd like to say is that each crisis is basically an opportunity to make sure that we strengthen our conviction about the policy that we are having and applying, and perhaps the strategy and the vision that we want to develop. And a crisis has to be managed in this way. Of course, short-term managing the risks affected or associated with the crisis, but long-term trying to make sure that we reflect on the longer-term vision that has to be stable in a company that wants to last. Second, I think the crisis causes a major threat to one thing that is absolutely critical to longevity, which is independence. So I think during crisis, all over the centuries of the last 2 centuries, our firm has been really making sure that it sticks, or it has been able to stick to its business model and its business values. That was one of the perhaps guarantees, perhaps not enough, but one of the 2 guarantees of independence long term. And in this respect, I think it has to do first and foremost with aligning interests of the company with those of those clients. If you're going through a crisis, the clients do face also adverse conditions that you have to not only understand, but try to make sure that you can work on and help your clients with. And second, that you can also, in a very, very definite way, affirm the way you want to render your services. In our case, it's an investment advisory or a discretionary management types of mandate that is most often asked from us. So how do you, with convictions, while the world is full of uncertainty, try to continue to align your interest to those of your clients, making sure you help them go through that crisis? Because the easiest the clients will go through the crisis, the easiest your firm will go to the crisis. So I don't mean to be too long at this stage, but I think this notion of long-term vision, ensuring that independence is being safe-kept by aligning your interests to those of your clients and sticking to your values, has been essential I am the 6th generation in our family after those years, in making sure generations after generation, the business can be transmitted in a stronger way.
That's a fantastic way of kicking us off, Patrick. Emphasis there, as you started speaking, you said it all depends on seeing the crisis as an opportunity. You've spoken about sticking to the values and those as a moral compass, and of course, putting your clients first. So, Mr. Bitature, I'd like to come to you with this. I mean, Patrick talks about seeing the crisis as an opportunity, and for me, that really speaks to mindset. And I suppose the question to you then is, as you consider this global crisis, how have you had to change your mindset to ensure the survival of your family business in this environment? And how important do you think it is generally for family businesses to have an open mindset that allows them to see the opportunity irrespective of the crisis that they're in?
Thank you, Nozi. Mindset is key to survival. And unfortunately, we have to unlearn what we are taught at times in the business schools and institutions in the real world, especially so in sub-Saharan Africa, because the trends there are a bit different here. A lot of studies are being done today about doing business, especially in Africa, and what are the small differences. But those small differences, especially cultural attitudes, they go very far. So change of mindset is very important, having the right attitude. And at every milestone, you've got to refresh. It's like you press the refresh button to change your attitude. You've got to change your thinking. And it doesn't stop there. You must change your behavior. If you don't change your behavior, you will not change enough. Change is such an opportunity, like my namesake has already said. At every challenge, every crisis, look for the opportunity. Reinvigorate yourself, reinvent yourself. You've got to keep looking. In the past, we've talked about things like VUCA, which was volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, likely. The new world order demands that we live with it. We've got to expect this volatility. It's the normality. We've got to expect uncertainty. And it's not just like the past where we're told to manage risk. You've got to do things aggressively. Don't react to them. You've got to be planning ahead of them. Be strategic. And the complications and the crises we have today are even more complicated. Who would have thought a simple virus, like as mild as a common cold, could be as devastating as it has been? The trillions of dollars that have been spent, the way it has decimated economies globally. In spite of the lead time we're given, we knew it's coming. It began in China, went to Europe, went to America. Now it's in Africa. We had all the time to adjust and study, but still it's been so complicated and it's been ambiguous. So family businesses have got to be resilient. We've got to have that resilience. I like to think of the word grit, because grit is what it takes. You've got to have guts because you take a risk. You've got to have to be innovative all the time. You've got to have this resilience I talked about, be innovative, and you need to have tenacity. That's what business is like. Unfortunately, too many young people are joining the business world thinking it's an easy road. It is not an easy road. Running a business, it's easy to start, but keeping it alive the first 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 10 years, extremely hard. And I salute those who have run family businesses for 200 years. It's no small power walk in the park. It's a really tall order. And to hold it together, even within yourselves, you start fighting. There's so much pressure, internally and externally. There is enough pressure out there for us to have internal wars. So we need to have good governance, good structures, because these external shocks will come. And you just have to brace yourself and be ready to take them on.
So Patrick, fantastic starting response there. Amir, I want to pick up 3 words that Patrick has used. He said, refresh, reinvigorate, for resilience. So I'm coming up with a triple R model here, Patrick, in the flow as we're speaking. And so Amir, if we think about this refresh, reinvigorate, and resilience, surely beyond the mindset change, there might be also operational model changes that crises bring about. And I suppose the question to you is, we find ourselves here today on a virtual platform having this conversation, and that is evidence of the way the underlying operating model of the industry that you're in has had to change. Question to you is, how have you ensured that firstly your own mindset has changed, and that you bring the team along so that they can see the opportunity to bring about a new operating model that is resilient and that is relevant today?
I couldn't subscribe more to what Patrick just said. This crisis has been a real awakening for our company. You know, of course, that in the media industry, we were already under heavy pressure from various threats, the deterioration of the advertising market due to Google and Facebook, the deterioration of network distribution throughout Africa. And so basically this COVID situation transformed what was a slowly forming storm into a perfect tsunami for our company. It erased totally our logistics networks. We had to shut out our printing. We could not distribute our magazines. We had to cancel all our lineup of events. So these are type of issues that are potentially terminal for a company. So if you don't have these 3 R, as Patrick said, you will have a problem. So in our case, you have to react very swiftly, very decisively, and with leadership, and get all your teams on board. That's what we took very difficult decisions. The first 2 weeks of the crisis, we decided to change totally our business model, to shift from what was a traditional print-driven business model on relying on advertising towards a totally digital-first organization operating model, meaning we want to be one of the top international company in terms of digital subscription, in terms of news. We could have also, for example, in the event, have used the furlough process to avoid paying salaries and keep our expenses low. But we, on the contrary, decided to invest in the possibilities that digital gave us to organize events such as this one, for example. And so this required, it was required great reinvigoration, change, and we had a team that I was really very, very happy. They reacted very positively, very quickly, and we have been able to get by this first part of the crisis, because unfortunately we think the crisis is going to last quite a while. But definitely this mindset needs you to embrace disruption.
Absolutely. So this mindset needs you to embrace disruption. And you spoke about agility, Amir, the need to have a leadership team that is quick off the mark and able to navigate the new environment very quickly. So Patrick, I want to come back to you. One of the things you emphasized in your opening response was, if you make it easy for the client to survive, you make it easy for the family business to survive. So what advice, Patrick, are you giving your clients today, clients who are also family businesses, about how they should be navigating their way in this challenging time? Maybe we can get some free advice from you today as we listen in.
Well, Nasipo, I think I would, if I may, add 3 other R's to the answer. One is has to do with responsibility. Ensuring that we at all time just come down to what is the responsibility that we are facing in such difficult situation as a crisis. And the responsibility in our case, we saw it as a responsibility first vis-a-vis our people and staff. We employed 2,500 people across 26 countries in the world today. We're not that big, but still there are families everywhere that are facing different constraints and of course difficult situations. Dealing with this aspect first was meant for us to be dealing with the safety with which we could then cater for the interests of our clients. The second responsibility was, of course, towards our clients, as I was explaining before. The fact that we are in the service industry means that basically the human factor in being successful plays a huge role, and being at distance makes it quite challenging to sort of communicate that focus in a consistent and coherent way. So, of course, technology helped here, but also the fact that you constantly had to ask yourself, rethink, if you wish, the nature of the answers that you should give to your clients, and perhaps of the information that you should look at for those clients to be reassured about their situation. And the third one is, of course, towards the firm, because once you've catered for the interest of the staff, the clients, we are, as you probably know, organized as an owner-manager types of firm. We own our firm. We have been owning the firm for 8 generations now, and it's been transmitted every generation in a better shape than it was received in. And I think this responsibility towards the firm has to do, again, a little bit with this independence issue I was mentioning, i.e. be responsible means be prudent enough to make sure you stay independent, to make sure you can transmit the company. The second R, to be short, has to do with reputation. Make sure that while the circumstances may be terrible and difficult, you just make sure that you stick to your promises and don't go out of your way just because of short-term reactions or temptations. Just stay within your areas of expertise, and just make sure that if you have to refuse some businesses, even though times are difficult, you continue to do so when you feel it is not satisfying the reputational criteria that you should keep. But because in the service industry, as in many other industries, reputation is destroyed in no time. And finally, the third R has to do with results. You can only hope to be successful if you're shooting for achieving results despite the circumstances. So this entrepreneurial mindset that was alluded to by Patrick before is absolutely of essence. While crisis tends to make you react, crisis has to make you innovate and act. And I think in our case, we could do that having anticipated some of the big trends in our world today by, for instance, making sure that our offerings of advice was more pertinent after the crisis than it was, or during the crisis than it was before, introducing, for instance, strong and very innovative new investment strategies in the field of sustainable investing, for instance, or impact investing. So those 3 R's for me are certainly references to which one should think about when it has to do, or when we have to do with crisis management.
So Patrick, I think we're well on our way to sending a new model to the business schools around the R's that need to be considered in crisis. So in addition to refreshing, reinvigorating for resilience, there's responsibility, there's reputation, and of course, staying focused on the results. But, and of course, Mr. Bitature, if we think about this, all of these R's that we're speaking about, they have a bearing, though, on how our governance structures respond, how our decision-making bodies within our family businesses respond. And I suppose the question I'd like to bring to you now is, to what extent should family businesses refresh their thinking on their governance structures, on their decision-making structures or bodies, in order to remain relevant and resilient in times of crisis? More importantly, have you had to rethink your governance and decision-making structures for the Simba Group?
Thank you, Naziko. I'm quite aligned to the former speaker, Patrick, and I can see how that leads to governance. Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? Family-owned businesses are there, yes, for profit, but we don't just think of only profit. That is too old dogma. We think about the people, we think about the environment, we think about the planet. And when we do a business, and you find that very many family-owned businesses diversify quite widely in Africa, because there are so many more risks, I feel. The people that do business in the Western countries somehow seem to focus much more, but nearly every big successful family-owned business seems to have 3 or 4 different portfolios that they're managing. We go out to do business mainly to create value. Now, this value comes in different forms. There's, of course, financial value, which is very important. That's what we call profits, results. But we also have social value. And we find to us it is very important to build this social value. And that we do through the communities in which we operate, the business environment in which we operate. And then there's what I call relational values. You have to build these relational values, and they take time. And that's where businesses that are intergenerational have so much more strength over startups, because they have built long-term, strong relational values. And lastly, this is where I resonate with my former speaker, reputational. You've got to build reputational value. Now, when you have all these as your targets and you try to align yourself, you've got to have governance that can manage these values and the opportunity you're creating. And you've got to look on the other side, juxtaposed to it, the risks. What are the associated risks and what are you trying to do? Because governance is all about this oversight. Now, in Africa especially, or a bit more than the rest of the world, there is the political risk. With a stroke of a pen, your business can be destroyed. In Africa, we're still seeing coups happening, which I thought was a thing of the past, and I was devastated to see the other day Mali falling because of a coup, a military coup. You look at Sudan the other day, because of a fight over the price of bread, a government was toppled. So political risk is extremely high still in Africa, in our context, a lot less in the European market or the Western American countries. Then you look at the macroeconomic risk, macroeconomic challenges we have on hand. Inflation has been a challenge for so many countries for so long. It seems to be something we never seem to get a complete grip over for a long time. Whereas many countries like Japan, even Europe, most of Europe, is struggling to get a bit of inflation because their countries are so depressed. In Africa, we're still trying to harness inflation. That's a big risk we've got to manage. Now, the skill set required for governance at the different boards, you've got to have your finger on the pulse all the time. That's at a macroeconomic level. When you look at the microeconomic level, you're talking about things like the liquidity within the business. You may have a very profitable business, but if you don't have liquidity, cash flow, you're in trouble. And it's not much harder to access cash with a profitable business in the African environment compared to Europe or America. If you've got a good business, it will easily be backed if it's a profitable business. Liquidity should not be a problem. But in Africa, so many businesses go down because of liquidity. Yet they were sound businesses. But if you don't have a different skill set to keep access to this cash flow, you're in trouble. Then there could be also many other external factors, what I call exogenous factors. Exogenous factors are things like commodity prices. You're trading in a commodity, whether it is coffee or copper or tea or vanilla, and the price is determined by somebody completely outside your control. And that causes a shock to your business, especially when you're in the agro-business area. You've got to be very mindful of that. How do you mitigate these risks? Lastly, things like what has happened today with COVID. COVID technically is a force majeure on everybody. We're just declare a force majeure because you can't do business when you have such a hard lockdown that we've had. In Uganda, we've had probably one of the hardest lockdowns. It's paid dividends because we probably come out so much better with very low loss of lives, minimum loss of lives, and a very high recovery rate. But the lockdown was extremely hard. It hit the economy. Now, if you're in a family-owned business, some of these businesses may not survive. They don't know how much the damage was. We're talking about damage to people's lungs when they get sick. Also in a business, the lungs can get so badly damaged by the lockdown that you don't get to recover, or you have the scars for a very long time. So governance is key. And now when you begin a business and you're small, it's an owner-run business. With time, it starts growing. It cannot just be decisions made by an owner. You need to have directors that are fit for purpose. You may not like them, they may not be your best friend or your schoolmates, but they've got to be fit for purpose. They bring insights that are priceless. And that's the direction we've got to do. Now, there's a stickiness in Africa, especially, where we don't take out our brothers and sisters or cousins and uncles. We don't want to kick them out, but we've got to move in that direction, where you bring in people who are fit for the job, and not just because you know them or trust them and they build loyal to you. Loyalty has its place, but in times like this of uncertainty, of volatility, you need to have a very robust team. Now, my business had to go through this kind of reinvigoration. We had to readapt to the environment. I've had to bring on PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to help restructure, look at my business from outside in, to see, am I doing the right thing? Do I have the right team? What do I need to do? Do we need to restructure internally? What do we have to do with the financing? Do we have to reprogram some of the things? Have I invested heavily in hotels? And hotels have got a big capital upfront investment, but hotels that are 40, 50-year business. So you had taken a long-term perspective. Now you have a speed bump like this, that's a very strong speed bump. You've got to readjust, and you've got to look at other cash flows, because you cannot restructure a hotel that's planned for 50 years and get the cash flows back on track easily. So the environment is changing, and we have to always adapt and be agile.
Sure. Mr. Bitature, that's an incredibly comprehensive and response to the question. I think you delivered more than what I was hoping for in that question. And so I'm almost compelled to ask a very quick follow-up question. As you talk about the need to bring on directors and non-executive directors, the need to refresh that governance structure, the need for fresh thinking and new framing and new eyes, if you will, to some of the opportunities that are lying within the crisis. How challenging is this for family business to take that step of bringing in directors that are not necessarily family or blood ties, but they do have the requisite skills and expertise to help you unlock the opportunities?
It's not an easy task, I must tell you, especially when a business is so controlled by the family. Now, when you see the family has grown, the first 5 years, maybe it's owner managed. 5 years later, it's now family managed, not just owner managed. After a short while, it is family controlled, not just family managed. And then at the end, you find it is now family owned. So it has evolved from owner managed now to family owned. And that means you've got to have a different kind of structure to look at how you invest and how the ownership is, because it's no longer sole ownership business. It's more of a family, and you've got to make decisions. Now, when your brothers you brought on board get married, indirectly, their wives are also sitting on the board because they influence their thinking. Every major decision, you have to go back and they consult the family, and that causes ripples that you do not foresee. You have a meeting, and if they don't make a decision, they say, I'm going to consult or I'll think about it, but they're talking to other people. So you've got to be quite firm if you are the helm, the head of this family. When you make decisions, the board must be effective. They must come in well prepared, they must listen, pay attention, and they must make decisions and move quickly. That response is very important. Now, if you have the right team, you can do very well. You keep moving and you've got to stay ahead of the curve. If you're too far ahead of the curve also, you might be in a problem. So you've got to stay in touch with what is happening on the ground. That means it's like you're looking after a patient. You've got a responsibility. You can't just take the pressure. You've got to manage the temperature, the pressure, just make sure there's no blood clots in the system. The body's got to be functioning, all the key vitals, the organs are all working. If you don't do this comprehensively, and it's becoming more and more complex, but fortunately there are tools out there that you can use to help you, so you stay ahead of the game. At times you think, just keep marketing, spend money on marketing, cash flow will come back. It might not come back. So you need to have a team that understands the issues and deal with it, and also manage the staff very well, because the interior, managing the inside of the company is just as important as managing what's happening on the outside.
Sure. Mr. Bitature, thank you. So Amir, I really want to come to you with this. I'm sure you might have some comments based on what Mr. Bitature shared. So you're more than welcome to give me some of your comments. But I do want to bring a question to you as well, Amir. Assuming that we have constituted the right team that is agile, that is responsive, that understands the issues, that can keep this patient not only just alive, but keep the patient functioning at its optimal level. From a culture perspective, Amir, how do we change the way our teams and the organizational culture that is required in this new environment? You spoke earlier about agility and responsiveness, and that is dependent on a specific culture, a culture that allows people to move quickly, to make mistakes and to fail and to try again. My question to you is, what has your experience been about trying to shift the culture so that it enables the kind of team and the kind of organization that this crisis demands? Over to you.
What you just said, what you just asked, is connects with what Patrick just said. I think there's a point that we need to address, especially with the African family businesses to date. We usually in the company have a motto, which is talent wins, always. It means that the CEO, the managing director, is in charge of the strategy, of the game plan, but at the end of the day, you need to have highly skilled, highly motivated players, and whatever your organization is. So that's the most important thing. And in order to do that, I think there's an evolution that needs to be done, especially on the African continent, which is the role of the human resources officer. Very often, it's an administrative function, and it's very seldom, except for the big companies, on par with the CFO, who is the traditional right hand of the CEO, of the MD. And I know this is a struggle for a lot of my friends who are here participating to this event. We've had this discussion many times. It's a complicated position to fill, because human resources has clearly not been the destination of choice for top African graduates in the last 20 years. So it's can be easier to find a CFO, but finding human resources officer who is at the same time a good organizer, a good leader, is very complicated. And to my point of view, it's today one of the things which is paramount if we want to have an efficient organization. You need a human resources officer who helps the management, the leadership, shape an organization that is efficient, that is going to empower its top executive, because as we just said, very often when you've had the family members taking most of the decision in a company, it is very often intimidating for other executives, and sometimes they want to stay in the background. So this human resources officer, making it the top executive within your company, gives you a way to identify top talents, cultivate their growth within the company, and help your company achieve its goal. So I think this is definitely one of the issues that needs to be evolving in the next years.
Fantastic, Amir. I mean, that's a really, really poignant response on focusing on human capital and the talent. Now, this panel really is about looking into the future. So as we begin to wrap our conversation up, I do want us just to reflect a little bit on the opportunities that we are all seeing on the horizon, and the extent to which we're going to be tapping into those opportunities and investing smartly, if you will. And maybe, Mr. Odier, I'm going to start with you, Patrick Odier. What are you seeing on the horizon as the new sectors that are ripe for investment, and in what ways can we expect the Lombard-Odier Group to be investing smartly in these spaces?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Actually, I will bridge the previous one with this one, i.e., there's, running an investment advisory or an investment management activity has to do with putting really the objective of achieving superior return at given risks first and foremost. Today, if this objective is maintained, the very good news is that by doing so, you also are getting to reach societal objectives that are becoming much, much more important than they were in the past with regard to the way people behave, consume, regulators regulate, technology applies, and capital gets invested. We at Odier have been investing sustainably for the last probably 30 years, perhaps pioneering a little bit that field, and getting to the point of analyzing every single investment opportunity through the lenses of sustainability has led us to ask ourselves as an enterprise, and I just wanted to make that comment, which leads to exemplarity. I think we need, as family businesses, when we are committing to being on the cutting edge of our business, we need to make sure that we also are on the cutting edge of societal values and what society is expecting from economic actors. And from that, for that reason, we at Odier decided, while having been talking to investee companies for such a long time about the criteria through which they should manage and not manage their companies, their business model adaptation, etc., we decided to look at ourselves. And we looked at ourselves by asking the reference accreditation agency to look at us, which basically is a B Corp accreditation, to tell us where we were doing things right and how we could do things better. And I think I just wanted to add this because we did it right in the middle of the crisis. Actually, not this one, but the previous one. And the previous one was close enough so that we could really drive and perhaps reap the benefits of that experience very quickly. So I would advise any family business that can allow itself to do it to just reflect on the exemplarity by saying, how can I better walk the talk than I've done until here? And that's something that in the investment field has proven to be particularly interesting. Now, getting to your question, there's no issue, there's no question that the world is getting to a limit with regard to the way growth is being performed. And we all know what are the limits, and we all know what are the main trends that we have to address. And we at Odier have looked at these trends very, very fundamentally, getting to transform our entire investment infrastructure to make sure that each and every of our investment professional look at sustainability as being the key factor for success, but also for potential risk. And doing so, we of course are looking today at the world quite differently than we were in the past, but with one caveat: we're not excluding anything. We're just looking at those companies and perhaps industries first that are really going to contribute to those successful industrial efforts of tomorrow, because they've understood the constraints that I'm just referring to, and they have integrated these constraints into, one, their policies, and two, into their business model. Doing that, we go one step further, looking at whether this integration has impact, i.e. materiality, on the results of this company, because every and each of us could probably be saying lots of things about being sustainable while not putting much in practice, and certainly not having much impact on our financial results, which at the end, as was mentioned already many times, is what counts if you want to make a company successful long term. So this materiality grid has led us also to identify trends and industries, both in the existing sectors, but in new sectors. If you take the energy sector, it's a good one when it comes to transition. Looking at the companies that have the capital expenditure means today to transform the way they produce energy into a more or cleaner energy than it was in the past, are actors that we are really interested in trying to invest in, because we know they're going to be faster. Looking at companies that will invent solutions, perhaps to fly a helicopter differently than it does today, which basically it's a very dangerous, very noisy, very polluting, and very expensive way to travel, into something that could alleviate those weaknesses, is also something interesting. You could do that through mobility types of new innovation. So there are many sectors where now, and practically all sectors, with both those transition and those innovation opportunities will be possible. So in a nutshell, the world will remain very probably managed from an industrial point of view, from a perspective of 150 or 160 industries. It is the way those industries will manage their business model that will make the difference. So it's less new sectors than it is new models.
Sure, that is absolutely deeply insightful. It's not about new sectors, but it is about new models. And that question that you led off with, which is, are you at the cutting edge of societal values and what society needs. Mr. Bitature, I've less than 2 minutes, but I really would want to hear your view on this very question of what's on the horizon for the Simba Group and what would smart investing look like for you in that space?
Okay, I think the key words now will be about what we've got to manage growth. And how we will manage growth. I can think of 5, maybe 7 points very quickly. Number one, we're going to have to manage revenue. Managing revenue growth is really about our sales, getting the pricing strategy right, whether you should do mergers or acquisitions. Number two, we've got to manage profitability. If you can manage profitability and create insights, here I'm talking about enterprise performance management. I'm talking about business intelligence, the use of big data. That is the future. This has become very clear, especially after COVID. Cost optimization, operational restructuring. Number three, you've got to manage talent, inside and outside. It begins with the leadership of the board. The board has got to be managed very well to that talent. Performance management for your key staff. Workforce of the future. Talent development, diversification and inclusion. We need to have a diverse system and global mobility. The world is becoming smaller because we are so interconnected. We've got to, number four, manage risk and regulation. Here I'm talking about regulatory compliance. It's going to become even more. Risk management, control of the environment, cyber security. It's a big one that's coming up. And all businesses are going to be impacted. Sustainability, tax compliance. These areas have got to be managed closely. Number five, managing capital. How you manage your working capital, capital and finance structure. Do you go for an IPO? Do you get investors? Bank reporting, treasury. These functions are becoming key for the future. Number six, managing ownership. Our purpose, our values, corporate and family governance, very important. Lastly, and probably the most important, is managing digital transformation. Digital strategy and transformation is going to be key. The business model, innovation, culture, technology strategy, and process digitization. These are the key areas, I think, of the future going forward. Whether you're a big company, SME, or a large company, you've got to keep a finger on all these parts.
So keeping a finger on all 7 of these points is going to be incredible. Amir, we've got 30 seconds to take us home. And here's the quick question for you. As we talk about the future of the family business on the continent, if you were to think about that future as a billboard, what would that billboard say? The future of family business in Africa, if you could complete that sentence as a way of capturing your vision for what you hope for family businesses on the continent. It's a tricky question, but I've got faith that you can do it.
Yes, thank you to give me that tricky question at the end. No, Zippo, what I think is really, I've known all these family businesses that we have been receiving at the forum for now almost 10 years. And I've seen so much energy, so much resiliency, so much capacity to innovate that I have the utmost confidence that they will be the driver of Africa's growth in the next decades. I think what we have achieved with the CEO Forum and with this type of summit is to help all of these family business owners to connect together and create a strong network. And as we say, the closer we are, the tighter we are as a community, the stronger we will be. So this community is at the core of Africa's economic development. We need to have much more opportunities to get them together and get the energy of every CEOs and MD of these companies flowing and helping us overcome what will be, of course, a big challenge for Africa in the next months and years.
Fantastic, Amir. That was a very long 30 seconds, but what an incredible answer. The African family business is going to be the driver of Africa's growth. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how we're going to be closing off this opening panel discussion. Thank you very much to Mr. Bitature, Mr. Odier Lombard, of course, to Amir Ben Yahmed for joining us in this panel discussion. And that concludes this panel discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. What I would like to do now is just to bring your attention to the next sessions that are going to be coming up now as we continue to have robust conversations and discussions. Now, the next session that is going to be starting is going to be kicked off with the panel, and the title of that panel is where is the global economy headed and what can we expect for Africa? And that is going to be moderated by Eleni Giokos from CNN, and we're looking forward to that conversation. Remember, we're also going to be going also into parallel workshops at this time. One of those workshops focusing on continuity and to the extent to which family businesses are able to weather the storm or weather the crisis with a cross-generational approach. And of course, another workshop on family cohesion and how we might build long-lasting governance structures. And that's going to be headed up by Ellen Barr, who is head of family business at KPMG. I just also want to extend a special invitation to all of you to please visit our virtual expo, where you are going to be finding information on our partners, who we want to thank absolutely sincerely for making this summit possible. And of course, on the app, you can also visit the tab that says Ask the Experts. And this is where you're going to be able to interact with our experts in private banking, in financing, in law, and many other topics. Now, one of the last two things I do want to say is that I mentioned that the panel that we are going into is going to be moderated by Eleni Giokos of CNN. But I also wanted to let you know that facilitating the workshop on continuity and weathering the crisis with a cross-generational approach, we have Elmarie Fenter. She is from the Family Business Unit at the Nelson Mandela University. And so that's going to be an incredible session if you're going to be joining her there. And I have mentioned that Ellen Barr, who's the head of family business at KPMG, is really going to be running with the workshop based on family cohesion. So remember to follow through by going to all of these amazing conversations that we have started. Before I leave you, I want to come back just to do a quick recap of the conversation that we had. I'm just going to recap the R's. It's all about responsibility. It's all about reputation. It's all about results. It's about refreshing. It's about reinvigorating. And it's about doing this so that we ensure that family businesses in Africa remain resilient, but they also remain relevant. Some really interesting topics that have kicked us off. For now, though, I'm going to ask you that you find your way to your next session, and I will see you towards the end of the day. Thank you so much for an incredible start to our conversation.